Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm just giving you a heads up. I probably have to leave right around 5:30. I got a 30-minute window on this one. Apologies.
All right, good, Mr. Myth. Thanks for letting me know because I think with the courtesy of the committee, I want to advance the issue while we have some CPW allies on the line. They're at the bottom of the agenda. I'd certainly like to be a hear part of that discussion. So we online?
Works for me.
Okay. We up on YouTube, Mr. Clapper?
Yes, we are. We are live right now and recording.
All right, good. Let me call the meeting to order. We do have a challenging agenda today. Call the meeting to order. And let's put ourselves in the presence of the Lord and observe a moment of silence. Thank you very much. The chair entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 25th meeting.
So moved.
Properly moved. Second, all in favor of those minutes?
Aye.
Please say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Because I said I'd like to give a courtesy to allies at CWS. We have an issue out on Johns Island on the miscellaneous, almost at the end of the meeting. We already heard the mayor's gonna have to leave a little bit early, but I-1 update on a tank, a truck that had a spill out on Johns Island. With the pleasure of the committee, I'd like to move that up on the agenda. Please, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moving second. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We're going to go down to item I-1. And all I know is what I read in the newspaper. So this is an item that Councilmember McBride asked to be brought forward. So Councilmember McBride, we have two people from CWS on, Mr. Baker Mordecai and Mike Sayer. Would you want to tee this up, Councilmember McBride, why you asked for it to be on here?
Yeah,
so
I appreciate you, Chairman, putting this on the agenda. And it obviously significant incident that happened on Johns Island with I think it was a Drew transport truck fell off into the ditch on River Road, North River Road, and it spilled a lot of the leachate into the ditch. And so there's that issue alone, and just kind of looking for kind of the aftermath of all that. But the larger issue that was brought up to my attention from people that have lived in Johns Island for a long time is the fact that those trucks are on River Road in the first place. And so I'm kind of looking to get an idea of how many of those trucks traverse River Road. And I know that they go to the station there, just off, I think off of Brownswood Road and River Road to dump a lot of that leachate, which I think originates up in Dorchester County, if I'm not mistaken. But my concern and the concern of the people on the island is just that, the River Road is getting more and more and more crowded. It's a 2-lane road, not a lot of shoulders anywhere on River Road, which contributed, of course, to the crash, I think. So just looking for, again, just kind of an aftermath of that crash and the leakage of the material into the ditch, and also just to understand more of why those trucks are on that route and if there's any alternative thoughts on where they could go.
It's okay. Let me, I think Mike Sayer probably had a word or two on this after it happened, so I think he'd be the first one to lead off. Mr. Sayer?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councilmember Waring and Councilmember McBride for bringing this to our attention. We're always glad to talk about anything related to our service. But you're right. Drew Transport Services was a private hauler contracted by Waste Management, Oak Ridge Landfill, to haul leachate to a pump station, a large regional pump station we have there on Johns Island. And, the truck went off the road. Obviously, it's not our hauler, so we don't know exactly why, but we've only heard third-party anecdotal evidence. Maybe the driver was a little bit drowsy and he was certainly greatly injured. and spent some serious time in the hospital after the crash. But he was bringing leachate from that landfill to our facility, and those trucks typically carry between 4,000 and 6,000 gallons. We don't know definitively how much was on the truck that day, but what we've heard is that most of it was spilled. So I think it would be fair to say somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 gallons. Drew Transport arranged for environmental cleanup, and they got in there, cleaned it all up, and had the scene cleared probably in a matter of 3 or 4 hours, maybe. And so that was done. It was all fully remediated, and I don't know where they took the leachate, but it didn't come to us directly that day. But we received more hauls from Drew that day. That event received a lot of media attention, so I'm pretty much up to speed on it. And there's a number of reasons why we bring leachate to that facility on Johns Island. But and we're getting a lot of questions from the community out there about it. First and foremost, people wonder, what is leachate? It's primarily garbage chutes, to use a general term, and rainwater. And they're asking, is it toxic waste or is it hazardous waste? And any untreated water, stormwater, or anything like that is considered a toxic waste, but it's definitely not considered a hazardous waste. And that's because the EPA has deemed landfill leachate that comes from landfills that do not accept hazardous waste. That leachate is not, therefore, a hazardous waste. So that's definitely a topic that's been in a lot of social media conversations that we've seen. People ask us what's in it. Of course, we don't know what's in every drop because we don't know what people send to the landfill. And, but we do know that it meets industry standards. We do know that it is a high strength wastewater. And, we're also asked, and you've asked the same question, is why does Charleston water system really accept leachate, and why do we bring it to Johns Island? First and foremost, we're the largest utility in the Low Country that can handle it. No other utilities can really accept landfill leachate, and we take it from a few different places. But this one happens to bring it by truck. Others send it through the sewers. Bees Ferry sends it directly through a connection to us. But first and foremost, you don't want landfill leachate treated and released above your watershed, your drinking watershed. So it is a tremendous benefit to the entire Low Country that we treat this leachate and then release the water into the harbor versus above us into where our drinking water comes from. So that's a huge positive right off the bat. Number two, we have a critical symbiotic relationship with waste management at Oak Ridge. We send our solids there. And our solids that come out of the wastewater treatment process, they're about 80% liquid. And so in a way, a lot of it is circular. We send our liquids to them, they send them back to us. And so it's really a critical relationship between both entities, I mean. Those are the primary reasons, but the reasons why we accept the leachate at this facility are manyfold. There's a good handful of reasons, and they're all very strong and very valid reasons. Number one, leachate is incredibly high strength wastewater. This is not wastewater that comes from your home, which is 95% tap water, 99% tap water. And we need to put it into a facility that mixes in with a high percentage of residential wastewater, which Johns Island is a perfect example of that. This is a regional pump station that collects a lot of wastewater from other pump stations that's sent there, and it's really, really low strength. So for us, operationally, it's really critical to have that mixture to dilute it, because high strength wastewater destroys our pumps and our pipes and any other infrastructure it comes in contact with. And this pump station is actually on Murraywood there. It's actually a perfect distance from Plum Island, has enough time to allow that mixing that I just described to occur. But also it's not too far away where strong wastewater can only become stronger, because as wastewater ages, it only gets worse. So it's a nice approximate short distance. It has nice, really good mixing. And this pump station also, luck has it, is that it's a very large pump station, but it's oversized. It was built for additional growth that never really came to the area. So the pipes are larger, the pumps are larger and stronger, and so it can handle any amount of additional flow that comes its way. So it's really ideal from that standpoint. But really, from a logistical standpoint, it also comes down to the fact that this pump station is the only one that's along a decent sized road artery. And it also has enough of a footprint, a property where trucks, large trucks, tanker trucks can come in, do what they need to do, and then leave. And a lot of our regional pump stations are incredibly small footprints. A lot of them are located in dense residential areas. This one checks all the boxes for the right reasons. But possibly the most important reason why we need to take it to a regional pump station in the first place is because when you bring a very high strength leachate wastewater directly to the Plum Island wastewater treatment plant, which we have in the past, it wreaks havoc, really causes a lot of problems to our process because we know it's strong, but we don't know exactly what's in it. And you're injecting that directly at full strength right into our wastewater treatment process, which is, there's physical removal, but it doesn't really apply to leachate. And then there's biological treatment, which is what our plant relies on to keep the wastewater safe when it's exiting our plant. We need to properly treat it using biology. And if we hit it with a big, strong slug all at once, because of course, truckloads at a time or a big slug all at once, then it's really caused some damage to our treatment process and our flow. And so it's just not a feasible option to deliver it straight to Plum Island anymore. We've been bit by that bullet too many times,
Just really quick question. What about the Bees Ferry station? Could it be dumped there?
Bees Ferry. Well, no. Bees Ferry has a direct connection to our sewer system. It's not a special pump station or anything like that. They're plumbed into our system just like any other customer would be. It just happens to be a little bit of a bigger pipe, so to speak. And it's not their responsibility to take private leachate from other landfills just because they happen to be a landfill. So, and when you bring up Bees Ferry, it brings me back about 5 years ago. Bees Ferry, before they were connected to our system, they used to haul about 10 truckloads a day. And that's what you're seeing right now is about 10 truckloads from a number of different haulers are bringing their material to us, their leachate to us. And so we eliminated 10 by eliminating Bees Ferry. So in the last 5 years, we've cut the traffic in half. And, we're well aware that traffic is a major concern. We're well aware that the road is an issue. We're also cognizant, it's been brought to our attention by a resident who says that when our trucks make the right from River Road onto Murraywood, that their trailing tires have caused some divots, some ruts in the shoulder of the road. And so we're voluntarily heading out there in the near future to put some additional pavement there to make that turn a little bit of a wider radius for the trucks to get by. And we spent quite a bit of money upgrading this station so it can be as smooth of an operation as possible. Our trucks used to back up onto Murraywood Road. They don't anymore because we've permanently kept the gates open so trucks can come and go without having to use a key card or anything like that. It makes their transition in and out very, very smooth. And we've added additional curbing. We've made every assurance that the wastewater being dropped off there won't leak out or leave the exact spot where it's supposed to be deposited into our facility.
Let me put a pin in it right there. Let me ask any other council members, Mr. Mayor, or any other council members, do you have any questions so far on what you've heard?
And just for clarity again, where was it coming from?
It's coming from the Oak Ridge landfill. It's Dorchester County. Basically, it's off of rivers way up past Ridgeville, off of 52 up past Ridgeville, about maybe 5 or 10 miles.
But not on Johns Island.
No, it does not originate there. It's landfill leachate, and it comes from primarily, most of the trucks that come there from that facility.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I know I went fast. I know we're short on time. I just tried to consolidate it all.
I kind of want to get
Fire your questions away.
I didn't know whether Mr. Mordecai wants to say anything, or Mordecai wants to say anything. Baker, you?
Yeah, I think Mike covered it extremely well. I'll just add that, leachate is commonly treated at wastewater treatment plants, domestic plants such as ours, and it's not considered a hazardous waste, as Mike mentioned. We do regulate the leachate under our industrial wastewater pretreatment program. that is approved by DHEC. And we required them to submit a complete waste characterization before we accepted it. And our main goal in reviewing it is to make sure it doesn't pass through the plant and impact our NPDES permit, or that it doesn't contaminate our biosolids in any way. There are traditional pollutants like oxygen demand and total suspended solids and ammonia. And then there's a few non-traditional pollutants such as total toxic organics or oil and grease, but they're well below our pre-treatment permit limits.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. Well, I have
Mr.
one
Chairman,
question. How big
Mr.
is the
Chairman.
area out there?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one quick question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you distinguish for me between something being toxic but not hazardous? I think you said that earlier.
Yeah, so in this particular case, leachate waste is specifically excluded from the Resource Conservation Recovery Act and is not considered to be a hazardous waste. So that means it can be managed under the Clean Water Act. And under the Clean Water Act, the key thing there is to establish limits at your plant so that there's no adverse impact on the operations of the plant. And so, for example, this waste, it does include toxic substances, but the concentrations are such that they're within our pretreatment permit limits. And so as an example, total toxic organics in the leachate is 0.98 milligrams per liter, but our pretreatment limit is 5 milligrams per liter. So it's well tolerated by the treatment plant.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. McBride, you have any?
No, just I know there's a lot of agenda items, so if I could invite you guys to a future Johns Island Council meeting, I would love to have you come talk to the residents down there, just to kind of close the loop on this a little bit to figure out if there's any alternative solutions or just whatever, just to kind of inform everybody what's going on. And this meeting itself will be very helpful. And I see Boyd Gregg has his hand up. Councilman.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilman Gregg.
Got some bad audio. Just real quick, for the CWS folks. So with you mentioned the symbiotic relationship, and I'm familiar with that. This is part of what I do for my day job as an engineer. But so the symbiotic relationship where Charleston Water System hauls biosolids to the landfill sends leachate. You've got a project coming up here where Charleston Water System is going to build a composting facility that'll take the majority of those biosolids from the region, and you won't be sending those to landfills. So I guess in the future, do you anticipate continuing to accept leachate, knowing that you're not sending biosolids there, or is that something that you're looking to get away from over the next, let's say, 5 or 10 years?
You know what? That's a great question, and it's I'll tell you, with regard to biosolids disposal, there's been so many starts and stops to composting and where you're delivering it. All it takes is a few people to raise complaints about the odors and everything else that we really want to have this as a backup plan in the event that something happens. Obviously it's a huge cost savings if we can compost it. We've pursued that route as much as we possibly can, but we have enough experience to know that, that these things are sometimes not as sustainable as you want them to be. There's also new regulations regarding PFAS in compost that could impact the future strategy. But so the answer would be that we really want to have this as a backup, if anything else. Okay. And just so you know, the landfills have increased their costs. It's not getting cheaper for us to dispose of biosolids in a landfill. The costs escalated way above what the inflation rate is.
Okay, well, listen, thank you. We 20 minutes in on this one, so I want to thank Mr. Sia as well as Mr. Moteke for and Councilman Ryan for bringing this forward. And you all gonna close the loop by meeting out on John's Island at a future date. Last question: how big is this site?
Mike had his hand.
Yeah, well, I was to answer your question, I don't know the acreage, but it looks like about maybe 2 or 3 or 4 acres for the facility. But the functional space is about half an acre. But I did want to mention that we're going out July 11th to the James Island Town Council meeting. We've been invited to attend that meeting, so it's already on the calendar, and we're glad to be there.
All right, good.
James Island or John's Island?
John's.
Okay, got it. John's Island, great. July 11th, awesome.
Okay.
Just my last comment is just obviously I'm just concerned about long-term overusage of River Road. So just want to make that comment. Like, we're reliant on the county and for funding for road improvements for River Road, and it's just a never-ending cycle of this issue. So, but I appreciate you getting this really good information, and I look forward to following up with you guys later on. Thanks.
Right,
thanks for the opportunity.
All right, thank you all. Down to item E, acceptance and dedication of rights of way and easements. Mr. O'Brien, anything unusual there you need to call?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The first one is just a concrete pad in conjunction with the Hope Center project on Cunnington Avenue. It's entry to a parking area. And as we've mentioned before to the committee, anytime that we make an improvement at DOT right away, they ask us to maintain that. This is not that big a deal, 8.5 by 10 concrete pad. So we will do that and just get the approval. The other 2 items are drainage easements. Mr. Fountain and Stormwater have been able to acquire for the city. Unless Matt's got anything, I think they're pretty normal. Just will hopefully improve the drainage in those 2 situations.
That's wonderful.
Mr. Chairman, I move we take 1 through 3 together.
We have a second. Probably moved in second. We take items E1 through 3. Any all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 And any opposed? Thanks. Now let's
move for approval.
Yeah.
Second.
Probably move second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed. Temporary encroachments, Mr. O'Brien. Anything unusual or pretty much standard stuff?
Pretty much standard. All have been reviewed and recommended for approval, and we give them to the committee as information only.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move we go take items 1 through 10 together.
Oh, we don't have, that's just information, Mr. Mayor.
It's just information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we down to G1, environmental services update. Who's going to give
Sir,
that?
I'm going to do that. In the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, the update I really want to concentrate on is an update on our mattress recycling program.
All right, great.
In 2021, the city, in partnership with Bed Shred, we conducted a mattress recycling program in which we were able to divert 426 mattresses and box springs from our local landfills, and we were able to put that in our budget again this year. And so we will be hosting 8 drop-off events throughout the year, located throughout the city, Daniel Island, West Ashley, James, and Johns Island, to allow people to do this. And we also do an event in conjunction with the College of Charleston Move Out. And this keeps these mattresses and box springs out of our landfill, which helps us from that situation. And just wanted to report that to the committee. We'll be starting that in the next month or 2.
All right, that's great. I might have one to carry to be recycled. Any questions of Mr. O'Brien on any of that? H1, stormwater low battery, Mr. Fountain?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the low battery, this one is just information to council that we're being highlighted in a ACEC, APWAS, ASCE, which are 3 of the major engineering advocacy groups. It's the engineering companies, the Public Works Association, and the American Society of Civil Engineers for the low battery project on a national roadshow where they're basically highlighting infrastructure investment projects around the country. That's this Thursday at the low battery at 2 p.m. And that was all I had on that item. Just something worth noting. That project continues to garner a lot of national attention and acclaim.
Well, it sure does. I mean, it's one of the best in the country. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
H2.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So H2, we have discussed floodplain ordinance updates a number of times that towards the end of last year. We have some new committee members, and I wanted to see if it would be beneficial to go through those ordinance updates again, or if we wanted to just proceed to bringing recommendations to the committee in ordinance format. I can pull up the presentation that we did last year, but this was basically a discussion highlighting really two items, which are the critical components for ordinance updates, one of which is the 5-year cumulative situation, where basically we currently look at, maybe I'll just pull up the presentation just as I know it can be hard to follow verbal only. I'll try to be very brief with this. You know, it's a slightly complicated issue. There it goes. So the primary two changes we really need to make in the short run, in my opinion, my suggestion, the substantial improvement, substantial damage calculation, we currently calculate on a 5-year rolling number. So any permits for work, whether it's related to improvements or related to repair of damages on your property, are added together over a 5-year period and compared against the value of just your structure to determine whether or not you need to bring your home into compliance with current floodplain requirements. That this seems like a very straightforward, excellent idea to encourage people to improve their homes. The challenges we run into, Mr. Chairman, as you know, is that frequently people will buy a home that someone else may have done significant improvements to or had damage on. As a new owner, they will have, say, a limb fall on their roof from a tree, or a small fire or something in the kitchen, and they will get a relatively small amount of repair work. But when added with anything that's been done to the home over the previous 5 years, will trigger a substantial improvement, substantial damage, where you have to either elevate the home or demolish and rebuild the home potentially if you were built below flood elevations. So we'd like to change this to a 1-year cumulative that still receives most of the points for insurance discounting from the CRS program, which is the program the city participates in with NFIP to get all of the city policyholders in the National Flood Insurance Program blanket insurance discounts to around 20%, but takes away a little bit of what can be kind of seen as a trap, where a homeowner really has to understand a lot of information about a home when they purchase it that isn't necessarily disclosed on any kind of paperwork when you're purchasing. So that's one item. The other major item that we would like to shift to is just a clarification for freeboard requirements. So we already have a freeboard level of 2 feet for new construction, and then 1 foot for substantial improvement, substantial damage on existing homes. It's 2 foot on substantial improvement, substantial damage for commercial properties or new construction commercial properties. We just want to clarify in the ordinance that this also includes machinery, equipment, and machinery associated with the home. That's typically like your HVAC system, your ductwork. We already regulate it that way, but last time FEMA and the state reviewed our ordinance, they didn't feel it was clear enough. That is a mandatory prerequisite to basically receive any insurance discounts, is to have that freeboard requirement. So if we don't pass that requirement, we lose a lot of the insurance discounts that our residents have. So we think what we'd like to do in the short run is just bring those 2 changes back in ordinance format in the current ordinance to the committee, just to try to get these in place if possible for hurricane season and avoid some potential challenges. And I want to see if there are any comments from the committee on that.
Councilman Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fountain, we've talked about this one before on the mechanical equipment. So what? I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure. If you're just like replacing your HVAC in your house and you're in the floodplain, let's say your house is elevated, like post and beam foundations, but your mechanical equipment, condensers and package HVAC units are at grade, so could be in the flood, and you're just doing a like-for-like replacement, you're still going to need to get a permit for that, I assume.
We'll get a permit, that's right.
But it's not it's not due to a flood damage, or you still have to elevate? Because I mean, I'm looking at items can be elevated or designed so that floodwaters cannot infiltrate or accumulate within the component of the system. I mean, there's not a way to do that affordably in a lot of the houses that I know of. I'm looking at across the street at my neighbors, and they're kind of in that this area. So I guess the question is, if you're just replacing your HVAC equipment, it breaks not due to a flood, do they have to elevate and make it compliant with this substantial improvement?
Yes, you're typically only required to come into full compliance if you hit that substantial improvement, substantial damage threshold, where you have enough permit work that you're going to have to bring the property into compliance. We certainly strongly encourage anything you can do with any work that is accomplished to come into compliance, and you can't make yourself generally less compliant. But if you're grandfathered in through your existing rules, there's some exemptions into that. For HVAC, it's typically not hard. It's just a platform. Typically for the HVAC equipment, ductwork is more complicated. You can flood-proof your ductwork, but it obviously does cost some money to do that. That's one of the most common ones that we see as a recurring item of damage, where it gets flooded and paid for by insurance and then reinstalled. But yes, it isn't. Again, it isn't any different than what we're currently doing. It's more triggered, just like we talked about with freeboard for the remainder of your home. When you're building something new, or when you are substantially improving or substantially damaged, bringing everything into compliance, that's where it would trigger.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Fountain? Mr. Fountain, I think all these are great ideas. We've discussed them before. Do we need to take action on this, or you just had this for information or what?
This was an information item just to make sure that if the committee had any input or comments on that approach of just making 2 short updates to the ordinance. We would like to look at reworking the format of the ordinance in the long term to match more of like a national model style of ordinance, but that's a more complicated process, and I think it'll take a little bit longer. There's no changes in the requirements from doing that, just the way they're presented. But I'd like to make these 2 changes in the short run to try to get them in before hurricane season, or at least before the heavy part of hurricane season. Then we'll come back and look at those overall ordinance changes. And we're not proposing any other substantive rule changes at this point, just these 2 from a regulatory perspective.
And for what it's worth, this is Bear.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we got you muted by accident.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead. We can hear you now.
Sorry.
Okay, good.
All right. Apologies. Just wanted to make the point that this is being discussed in the water plan team's recommendation. So not sure what the timing. Sounds like you want to move forward on this, Matt, and versus it being part of the zoning rewrite and or implementation of water plan recommendations. So I'll get 6 on half dozen together with me.
So, Mr. Mayor, we could certainly wait on the rewrite of the ordinance for that other work. This would just be these 2 regulatory amendments that we would need to make in the meantime.
Okay.
Any other input? I see Council Lady Parker. You have?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, do you think, could we, when we discussed this before, we did talk about having sort of a bigger discussion or presentation regarding the flood insurance, like the CRS, the NFIP, the discounts. And do you think, I really think it would be beneficial, I know for me, for my district, for us to really understand what, if anything, will change. Will it be better? Will it make it? It doesn't sound like it's going to make it worse, but do you recall that? Do you think we could maybe add that to this discussion, since not today, but where we could really discuss some of those insurance,
Yeah, no, absolutely we can. This will make no change on the insurance rating, positive or negative, other than preserving our current discount if we were to not do the machinery.
I just think that's important to make.
Yes, we can absolutely highlight that. And we can refresh how that discount process works and what we do to receive that. It is a complicated issue and certainly one worth talking about.
super complicated, but I think it will really help clarify, it'll put into light the importance of this, this regulation state. And that way, continuing to keep that discount. So please, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Good. I think switching from that 5-year period to the 1-year period helps out the homeowners to a great extent. Any other input from committee members? Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Let's move on to item Council Lady Parker had put on an update on the municipal golf course bathrooms, which was a touchy subject last year. Who's going to address that?
I can certainly start it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Fountain, you're up.
So let me jump to my other PowerPoint, which we are here. So the municipal golf course on James Island, this is Maybank Highway, Riverland Drive. They're proposing 2 restrooms to be installed, and I certainly can only cover the restrooms in a very general detail, but I know these are very popular concepts to put restrooms on this course. I think there is a real need for that from what I understand, but basically a unit here near hole number 12 and a restroom unit down here kind of between hole number 4 and 5. Their engineer has been working through the stormwater design as well as some other site design work. We last provided comments from stormwater to their engineer in early April. Generally pretty minor comments. This one is relatively straightforward, discharges into a very large pond that then kind of discharges into marsh. The southern bathroom is really the one that's had more effort and design work, both from us and the regulatory community, of that this area discharges across Riverland into the area by Canal Street. There is some flooding in that location, so it's just trying to make sure that you don't discharge more water than is currently being discharged. The bathrooms are relatively small. The engineer came back with a modified design approach to add a little bit of like sand filter in to help the water infiltrate in the area of the bathroom. Should be able to get that approved, hopefully with relatively small changes. So Mr. Kronsberg could probably give you a better idea of when they would look at construction on the project, but from a permitting perspective, hopefully they'll be resubmitting shortly and be able to get into construction.
I'm gonna ask a bad question now. What do you mean discharge into the pond?
So it's the stormwater, not the sanitary sewer, Mr. Chairman, just the stormwater, the rooftops and the paving. They're doing some like very pretty landscaping with some paving of how the paths get into the building and the rooftops from the buildings, but no discharge of sewer into the ponds.
I had to ask me.
It's a valid question. That's one of the concerns they've got to show is making sure they've got plumbing into the septic or the sanitary sewer system, and then water quality even for the.
Thank you for answering that unequivocally. Council Lady Parker, I see your hand again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Matt. So as you know, people have been really asking and wondering when these are happening. They're very excited, but I was hoping maybe Mr. Kronsberg would be here too, because as a city, this is sort of one of those projects where we're tripping ourselves up, right? We have the Parks Department who's building it, but we have our stormwater permitting, all of that. And from what I understand, there have been, there might have been an old permit and now we had to get a new permit. So, Mr. Chairman, I know we've talked about this before as well, these city projects, these, where are we prioritizing, we've funded it, we've got the project ready to go, but we're kind of tripping ourselves up. So again, I know it's a lot for you to answer, Mr. Fountain, because it is a kind of a 2-pronged approach. We really need parks as well. But I guess just to put in layman's terms, when are we looking at completion at this point? Because as far as, if I'm not mistaken, so don't hold me to this, but I don't believe we've even put it out for bid yet as far as construction, correct?
That's correct. Normally you would not go to bid until you had all of your permitting in hand. You can, right, but it's a much higher risk for the contractors bidding.
So
why don't we do this, Ms. Barker? Sure. Obviously, it would have been good if Mr. Kronberg could have been here, but I'm sure he'll be at tomorrow's meeting. Maybe he could address that aspect that you're talking about tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I mean, but again, so from stormwater, we're pretty much through now.
So that we gave them comments at the beginning of April. If they resubmit and have addressed those comments, we would be through and they would have completion. They're relatively minor comments, so we're very optimistic they will successfully address them, but I can't guarantee it until I see the resubmittal.
Gotcha.
And you're right, Councilmember. Part of the challenge on this project from a stormwater perspective is they had just done a massive stormwater permit and construction project to redo the whole course. So trying to get that permit closed out and do the as-built and do all the verification it was built as designed took them quite a bit of time before they could start the golf course permit in for the bathrooms, because you had to close out the existing permit. They could have done it as an amendment to the previous permit, but that comes with its own challenges of then your requirements are much larger for what you have to do, because it's a very, very large project then instead of a very small project. So it was a, you know, unfortunate timing wise that the bathrooms couldn't have been wrapped into the rework of the overall course, but just timing got missed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for the update.
All right, any other input on that from council members? All right, thank you, Mr. Fountain. Item H4, which is installation of signage on small projects. Councilman Dudley Gregory asked for this to put on it.
Mr. Chairman. Matt sort of answered it a bit at the last meeting because they already do that. And I think my concern perhaps maybe was the size. But again, in talking to Matt, there's costs associated with all that as well. If we use the peach tree as an example, Mr. Chairman, I think the word got out with the approach of press release. The Peachtree Project was all over.
Yeah, we had great press on that. Yeah,
great press. Now, to me, if that's going to be the approach as we move forward, then I don't know whether or not the signage is necessary.
Well,
in terms of increasing the size, design, and all that other kind of stuff.
Well, let me say this. 20 years ago, in another century, I was chairman of the chamber, and at that time, the newspaper had a 27% circulation rate in the region. I don't know what it is today, but I don't think it's above that. So everybody doesn't get their information, as you know, from the from the newspaper. So I think we need to do both. Okay. We do things. We need to. This small project process, as you know, something Mr. Fountain came up with. We didn't have it prior to Mr. Fountain coming in. I think it grew from 500,000 and now it's $1 million per year. But can you imagine if we find a way as mayor and council to get Mr. Fountain 3 or 4 million a year? How many small projects he could get done? So let's let the people know. But anyway, I think we need a little bit better sign than what's being done now. And the press, as I said, that was great on this project. But people who are driving around, let's let them know we're working in their neighborhood. That's all.
Well, maybe I can pose the question to Mr. Fountain, because I think at our last meeting he did say that we do that already. So we're talking about increasing the size of the presence of the signs. I'll leave that up to staff to make a determination as to how do we get the word out and keep it out there through signage.
Well, yeah, maybe some of the people that got the word out to our marketing folk, to Mayor Cogswell, maybe they can come up put some input on that as well. I mean,
our PR folk. Okay,
got the word out great on Peachtree. Can't wait till you do something over here so we can have a similar response. Okay. Any other input on that, Mr. Fountain?
No.
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. Chairman, we did. After Councilman Gregory had brought this up, we did go back and look at what we do with small project signage. As you mentioned, we do kind of very generic, this project is funded by city stormwater, but they don't really relate to the project for small projects right now. So we tentatively are looking at leaving that for general maintenance, like heavy maintenance work we're doing. And we've been talking with traffic and transportation, as Councilman Gregory recommended for their sign shop, looking at could we reduce our costs by using some of the existing sign shop to do some customized projects. So this is like an example project I'm just showing of Peachtree, where our outreach coordinator put together just a graphic showing, here's the area that's going to be benefited by the project. Here's generally what we're doing. Mr. Somerville has agreed to try to look at doing some of these in his sign shop with stormwater, potentially funding some of the materials costs, which should still be substantially cheaper than what we're getting from vendor pricing. So it might be a nice way to kind of bridge that gap between sort of the really small work that we do, which is still very impactful, but we're moving those signs constantly and they're not very, it doesn't make sense financially to make them specific when we're cleaning out ditches or cleaning out pipes. And then the very, very large projects where we build the very expensive large scale signs. So we are going to try to do exactly what Councilman Gregory recommended. And many of the other council members have spoken to in support of that, of trying to get these site specific signs out when we're doing work that's more of this $100,000, $200,000 project scale. So we are working on it, and I think it's a great idea.
Okay, great. I thought I saw Mr. Mayor. Did you try to speak by phone?
No, I just said I like the idea and
Okay.
and to help.
Okay, good deal. Item 5, Church Creek, approval of addendum 2395,000 for professional service for Wolpert. Mr. Fountain?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this one is, we don't necessarily do it every year, but it's basically an annual budgetary amount that we do contracts towards for stormwater reviews in the Church Creek Basin and keeping up the sort of the master stormwater model that we maintain with Wolpert for as all the different developments coming out there. So we budget for this every year within the operations account through the budgeting process. We occasionally have to do addendums to the contract to cover the amount that we have budgeted. So this is a contract addendum to be able to cover the amount we have budgeted for the year. We may not expend this amount this year, but we have capacity in the contract this way.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Fountain on that item? Now item 6, H6.
I can't get a motion on that. Mr. Chairman, if I can't get a motion on that.
Somebody had a question on 5?
I did, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councilman Parker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Matt, I know I don't want to speak. I know we talked a little about some drainage issues in recreation, but would this, I asked in recreation, is this a contract, that we could use on a project like that since we're contracting out with these folks?
So this contract is specifically set up from an original RFQ for the Church Creek Basin. So it's only within the Church Creek Basin, but there is the potential to be able to do that within other basins.
Okay.
And we do occasionally do that. Wolpert is a long-standing contract just because of the complexity of the Church Creek watershed. When we had all of the significant flooding, we're looking at improvements out there.
Yes. Gotcha. Sorry, missed the Church Creek part. Thing.
And Mr. Chairman, if we can get a motion, we'll end up going through Ways and Means as an addendum.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah, before we get a motion, am I muted? So.
No, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Mr. Fountain, if you could just give, you feel comfortable with Wolpert? I mean, it sounds like when you see addendum 23 or whatever it is, sounds like it's an annual thing and a retainer of sorts. They don't have, in essence, a captive audience and can charge whatever they want, do they? I mean, you feel good about this being a reasonable amount for updating these calculations?
Yeah, so this is a not to exceed time and expense contract. So they only bill by the hour as we need services for them. So typically currently it is generally plan review, or if we have a need to produce tailwater conditions as like Long Savannah projects come through, so they can build off the master plan model. So that's where I was saying we may not expend this amount of money in a year. It depends how many projects come through in the basin and how much work we need to do. But they have a relatively reasonable hourly rate, and we certainly track that carefully.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, good. What's the pleasure of the committee on this item? Item 5. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded by Councilman Gregg. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now, G6, Magnolia Road and Anita Drive, Councilman Tinkler asked this to be put on. Councilman Tinkler?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for putting this on the agenda.
Sure.
I know, am I muted? You hear me?
No, everybody here is just fine.
no, I guess after the March 9th storm, I got more calls about this neighborhood, this area than others, and I had not heard a whole lot about it. And I called Chairman Waring about it, whose district is right across the street on Magnolia, and he had not heard a whole lot about it as well. So he had suggested putting this on the agenda as a way to put it on the radar screen and discuss a little bit. But I've talked with Mr. Fountain a little bit about it. I understand that there are two issues that I've seen, but one is at the intersection of Anita Drive and Jerry Drive, right off of there are two cemeteries right there behind the homes. In a big storm, that water from the cemeteries drains into a relatively small pipe to a ditch on Anita Drive, which it enters a ditch system that can get clogged up with leaves and debris, and that appears to be what's happening on Jerry Drive. Magnolia Drive, which is sort of it's a highway Department of Transportation maintained road, but there's a ditch system off of Magnolia Road that appears to go into the city's maintained ditch system in Magnolia, and blockages downstream are causing similar issues to some of the properties along Magnolia Road. So what is the city doing about this? I mean, what projects have been identified potentially? I know I've talked with or started conversations with the cemetery to see if there's anything that can be done there to try to mitigate the water before it flows into the neighborhood. But Mr. Fountain, I don't know if you've looked at it.
Yep, absolutely. I can certainly chime in a little bit, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so we do have actually a small project allocation project in this area. It's still in the kind of the early stages, but the neighborhood, as you mentioned, the majority of the loop of Anita Drive and the side streets drain through kind of a series of different ways up into this open ditch system that runs to the north of Anita into the bikeway. Including, as you can see here, all of Magnolia Drive basically just discharges into a ditch system back through some private property across the street. There is a little bit of easement at the beginning of the outfall system, and then there is a little bit of easement at the end of the outfall system where we start to enter some pipes. There is a section that does not have easement. There's a gap between those two sections that has sedimented in pretty thoroughly and is really limiting the ability of the neighborhood to drain that direction. So the project that we have in is looking at acquiring that easement between those two easement gaps to try to reconnect the ditch. We've had and then to acquire a little bit of easement here where Magnolia discharges through some private property. So that's how many of the older SCDOT roads were built. They just kind of discharged into existing ditch systems, and sometimes they acquired easement and sometimes they didn't. We've had quite a few discussions. We've had some success with some of the property owners. We still have a few property owners we're continuing to work through the discussion with of can we acquire the easement and what level of improvement can we do on the property. So as soon as we can finalize those discussions and try to connect, again, especially this system here coming off of Anita, but if you really want improvements, also this section that connects Magnolia to Anita, we'll be able to make some really substantive outfall improvements, which then lets us improve the ditches a little bit better on the system to get the water into those sections and not worsen flooding at the entry to those systems by bringing water more effectively from the flooded areas downstream to somewhere where then there's another constriction and worsening flooding.
As we all know, gravity flow is the most cost-effective way to cure any drainage project. Mr. Fountain, acquiring the easements, expand on that. I mean, we approaching these people.
We are. So we did survey work and platting so we could show where those easements are, and then are going back with the easement agreements to the residents, asking if they would be willing to dedicate gratis easement, and if so, what conditions might they have towards that dedication. So that's what we're working on right now, is that negotiation of trying to acquire these easements.
All right, great. The one south with the little 90-degree that you circled off of, right? Is that proving more difficult, or is that property owner, we in discussions with them, or they don't want to talk? What is that situation?
It is one of the owners we are talking to, and we're still trying to come to an agreement with on the acquisition.
Okay. Council Lady Parker, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fountain, on this, is all of this color coded? Tell me what state roads again. Can you point out again? So currently it's really just sort of private easements that you're looking to get, but so the pink is really the state ditches.
So that gets a little more complicated. The pink is generally pipe systems, and then the roads are actually not color coded. So the pink is going to be piping. The yellow and gray hatching is normally going to be open ditch.
Okay.
Magnolia is the main state road through the area, and then there's some local roads. I'd actually have to check to see which one Jerry is. I know Anita, I think, is local. The bikeway obviously is the first phase of the Forest Acres project. That's where that large pink is the very large box culvert that runs through that system as an outfall.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, and I did hear you say, so something the state, I mean, obviously, as you know, we've had many discussions. I mean, a lot of this infrastructure is just too small to hold everything, correct? Specific, the state. So even if we do get these easements, and I apologize, Councilmember Tinkler, I don't mean to run away with this, but I have similar items kind of like this on the agenda. Wow. So I want to kind of put it in your ear as well, that for me, it's obviously a multi-tiered approach is we can do our job, right? But if the state doesn't maintain and or upsize some of these complicated areas, correct, can we solve the problem, or do we need to look at a bigger, obviously conversation with the state?
Yeah, that can be a challenge. In this case, we've done a lot of the work. You can't quite see it here, but through the state road with the first phase of that Forest Acres project with the bikeway, we realigned the large culverts under St. Andrews Boulevard. If you remember all the lane shifting that occurred back in 2015, 2016 era. So that we've already kind of done those state improvements for the state on this project, and now it's coming back and kind of reconnecting the city roads into that infrastructure. But there certainly are other areas. Again, almost everywhere there's a patchwork of jurisdiction, and you're right that when the water flows through a patchwork of jurisdiction, you got to improve everybody's infrastructure, not just your part of the patchwork.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that, and it goes to some extent this line item, and then 7, 8, and particularly 9. I was not able to attend, but I believe Liz and Logan went to the Charleston County Flooding Task Force, which had the delegation there. And I know we get frustrated with the state, but we need to have very good relationships with them on a variety of fronts. And they are very frustrated on a lot of these issues, particularly items 7, 8, and 9 on this agenda. And Matt, I do need I'm going to ask that you go to those meetings, because they were asking a lot of specific questions and they weren't getting answers, and it just made them all the more frustrated, which, again, I know we can point the finger plenty at the state, but we are going to have to work very closely with them on these issues if we're going to get them solved. So I just want to throw that out there, especially in light of the fact that we're going up to Columbia on Wednesday. And we had a pretty big, I would say, contentious meeting last week related to some of these items on this agenda.
Okay, thank you for the input. Mr. Mayor, Councilman Tinkler and myself was also in attendance at that meeting on Friday, I thought was a very good meeting. It's good to know we got the help we do in the Low Country. It's just not our voice alone anymore. Let's put it like that.
And I will say to that, Mr. Chairman, one of the representatives at that meeting indicated, at least for this particular area, I mean, this is Magnolia, not too far down Magnolia Drive is the Ashley Forest neighborhood. That's one of those multi-district neighborhoods where you got county and Department of Transportation have some responsibility in there as well. And the representative indicated that this is if we can do this comprehensively, that he would be available to push for funding at the state level if we needed it. So I mean, I know Magnolia Drive is being a State Department of Transportation maintained road with that easement. I guess I don't know if it's possible to put a larger pipe having everything flow out down the road. So I'll leave that to the experts, but I appreciate Mr. Chairman.
I think Mr. Tinkler, Councilman Tinkler, you make a good, my point is primarily that I think where appropriate, and I think in local government, it's incumbent on us to lead the charge here and then push the state to put in their share and or the county as appropriate. But I mean, being local government, what I think our constituencies don't want to hear is, well, this is that, that's a county problem, that's a state problem. As we pointed out, it all connects together. and we're the ones that are dealing with it more on a day in, day out basis. So I think it's incumbent on us, like I say, to just take the lead here and really push them to back us up. And I think they will. I really do.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, but I'm gonna tell you one thing that came through clear at that meeting from a number of state representatives was that if they don't have a project and they don't have an amount that it's gonna take to fix it, they can't fight for the dollars. And that's almost a quote coming from one of the very influential persons on.
Oh yeah, no question.
So if we don't have a project and we don't know the amount, how can they know, hey, to go and fight for us to bring money back to the low country? Anyway, but that was a good meeting. Councilwoman Parker, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful task force. I mean, I encourage the challenges that we have over here on James Island. I mean, I lean on them heavily because these are extremely complex problems over here. But look, I will say, I mean, everyone understands we have to have a great relationship with the state, which I think we do. I think what we're not talking about is the maintenance. I mean, I agree. We need to take the lead on these. And I think a lot of us in our districts, we do. I mean, I certainly know that Mr. Fountain has done a tremendous amount of work for me over here on James Island, and Philip Sexton with the task force. But at the end of the day, it is not a secret that SCDOT is not holding up their end of the bargain when it comes to maintenance. I mean, that's just, so as much as we need to obviously identify larger projects, we need them to handle some of this maintenance as well. So
I got you. Any more input on this? Because actually I do have some more input on 9, and the mayor brought up 7, 8, and 9. It was quite a bit of conversation at that task force meeting on number 9. So I'll be respectful. And are we all in on item 6? Any more questions, Mr. Tinkler? Any more input, Mr. Fountain, on item 6, Anita Drive, and hopefully the easements that we're going to be approaching to acquire? Mr. Fountain, let me say this: these conversations with easements, if they get at a loggerhead, at what point in time do we say we have a discussion with legal to engage eminent domain?
So again, Mr. Chairman, we've looked at that on some projects where there's a benefit to the overall neighborhood, not just the residents impacted by the easement.
Right.
Which this does fall into that route. We certainly try to avoid that whenever possible.
Yes.
Because it's a challenging process for everybody, but we certainly can look at that as well as a potential option.
Okay. I mean, do we have, how much time we allot? 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
It very much depends on the process. I mean, typically we're looking for negotiation purposes at least at a year before we try to push into an eminent domain. If you want to go to an eminent domain level, you've got to do appraisals, title opinions, formal negotiations with the owners to show that you're attempting there's a whole tracking process with normally you hire a right-of-way agent because of the complexity of the
Right.
documentation work. So it becomes very much more expensive, and we come through committee, of course, to get
Yeah.
approval for budgets in order to do that first and through real estate.
Okay. All right. Good.
So generally about a year.
All right. Good. Good. Well, thank you for all of that input. Item 7, Fleming, Stir Creek Road ditch widening. Council Lady Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was a request by some constituents. There's a lot of flooding over there. And ultimately, again, this gets into that multi-jurisdictional, little bit of the pointing. We have a city street, we have a state street, but ultimately my request today, would it be possible, I believe the Stir Creek Road ditch, that is in our jurisdiction. And so some of the folks that live along there were curious if widening and, again, help me here because I don't have an engineering degree, but the berm, maybe raising the berm or something that would keep the water from getting into the properties.
I think I'm familiar with what you're asking, Councilmember Parker. So yes, in some of these areas we could look at trying to dig the ditches out larger, as you mentioned. I mean, that's always, we normally try to keep them exactly where they're historically at, because as you've experienced, sometimes there's some pushback on increasing ditch size, even though it does provide a flood benefit generally. The berming is a little more challenging in that you have to be careful whenever you berm, because berming blocks water from going both directions. So you have to be careful the berms don't end up blocking water into a property, not just preventing it from coming from a road onto a property. But the ditch size increasing can be very valuable. Occasionally, there's some benefits if you have like a very localized low area on a property to do a berm, or to do like where the road is draining into a property, or to do an asphalt bump across like a low-lying asphalt area. So we can look at that. I'm not sure that's the situation here, but we can look at it. The ditch widening, we certainly could do. I mean, Cross Creek certainly has some areas that you could improve the ditch sizing. So we could take a look at that.
Okay, Councilman Gregory.
Yeah, Matt, speaking of Fleming, I mean, traditionally, we've had a problem with Fleming Road and flooding. But in the past, we found out that a lot of the issues relating to Fleming Road, again, has to do with maintenance, as opposed to necessarily making the ditches wider or bigger, get the ditches where they're supposed to be. And I think in the past we had done some work over there that did make a difference. But then to even complicate it more, okay, if we're talking Fleming Road, we're talking sidewalk discussions too. Am I correct, Councilmember Parker? And before we even get to the sidewalk issue on Fleming, we've got to address the flooding. So I'm with you on that. But my question though is some of this maintenance driven?
There certainly is a maintenance component, Councilman Gregory. It's generally the challenge is in the side of the road and that drains down into the Central Park basins that do
yes,
we talked about for a long time, that there are sections of that are not maintained, many of them because they're not within easements. The city and county have both gone in and done what they can in localized choke points, point out debris or point out material, and both the county and the city continue trying to work through projects, very large scale capital projects, to try to improve the ability to do the maintenance to help these areas drain out more efficiently. So that is a significant issue in the kind of the Wamba Central Park Basin side of the project for sure. Cross Creek is a little more straightforward in that it's sort of the other side of Fleming Road drainage. It does drain back into the large lake that's back there, and then kind of through the Harris Teeter and out into Maybank. It has a pretty reasonable drainage system. It can just get overwhelmed in the really heavy rain events. And right now it can get the issue where Fleming Road actually backs up and flows into Cross Creek instead of down into the basin that it's supposed to flow into. because of the fact that there's nowhere for that water to go in the Central Park side of the project.
Okay.
So both things I think are necessary, probably. Certainly that overall capital project, which would allow some additional maintenance, and then there is the potential we could do some short-term work to store more water.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm back to Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, I mean, do we need a motion to just make that request on widening or deepening? I mean, if it would even be impactful, you know, I mean, the State Road Fleming is a whole different conversation, but mainly just Star Creek, Mr. Fountain, do we need a motion? Is that just something that your team or you can look into if widening that?
Yeah. Councilor Parker, we can certainly take a look at it. We don't need a motion at this point. We're not directing funding into or anything yet, but if you want us just to evaluate it, we can certainly take a look at it and see. It's always a little bit of a balance of trying to get to all of the project recommendations, but we can certainly add this into the seeing if we can do a year round of maintenance in the neighborhood.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And you know, let me just say, I mean, Matt, yeah, your crews have been out here. Y'all have been exceeding expectations, in my opinion, on the maintenance side of things. I think the city is doing a phenomenal job. And as far as vacancy rates go, I mean, I see y'all all over town maintaining what we need to maintain. So I just want to throw that out there.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I tell that, well, anyway, I'll get on the vacancy rate in a second. But anyway, Mr. Fountain, item 8, G8 Ferguson Village Riverland Drive ditch. Any input there?
I'm back. Can I jump in first,
You
Mr.
sure
Fountain?
can, sure, Council Lady.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously this is just another, y'all, this is just, I mean, this neighborhood, this is a city, these are city residents. They are underwater the past few storms. I can honestly say in all the years that I've lived over here, this past, I think the storm in March, I'd never seen Riverland Drive like that. I have spoken with many folks on the task force regarding this, and this really, in my opinion, does come down to a lot of the maintenance that we need SCDOT to do. And from my understanding, you know, SCDOT, you know, they want to build roads. I don't know how much they want to dig these ditches. And I think I asked y'all a few meetings before, you know, I asked y'all, I said, I think we really as a city need to take the lead on this. We have that flood task force delegation, but when it comes to maintenance, I mean, do we need a dollar amount like we talk about for the projects? Okay, well, is there a dollar amount for maintenance? I mean, is that what this committee needs to start talking about? Miles per, you know, ditch or whatever cost per mile? I mean, because these ditches along Riverland Drive, I mean, I don't know that last time they've been cleared out. Like I said, I mean, our crews are all over maintaining what we need to maintain, but if we can't get some of this bigger ditch handled, you know, there's just nowhere for the water to go. I believe this neighborhood is having a meeting tomorrow. I think our stormwater department is planning to be there, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Fountain.
It's a meeting with the stormwater department to look at easement dedications. Yes.
Okay. And but again, that would be on our side inside the neighborhood. Again, I get, you know, I'm maybe not looking for an answer, but also just some input. I mean, as far as getting SCDOT to maintain these ditches along Riverland Drive, I will keep pressuring the flood task force. But we are just not getting far on a lot of these maintenance issues. So,
you know, Council Lady, why don't we suggest, obviously our crews are doing, you know, they're flat out. Maybe we have obviously a conversation with the mayor, and I think we need a larger strategy on this one. Obviously the relationships we do have with the state and obviously county council and, you know, Ms. Honeycutt and obviously Senator Sin and Representative Stavanakis. So I think that's maybe a broader conversation that we can bring to bear, that maybe get some specifics on that, because if it's their ditches and it's clogged, they got to do their job. That's all. We do ours.
No, I think to your point, a lot of it's communication.
Right.
We're on the ground. We see it day in, day out. We hear from our constituency more than they do on details like this. And that's why I think it's important when we have forums like, the flooding task force,
Right.
that we're kind of all hands on deck. And I'm guilty because I wasn't able to make it. But I think having Mr. Fountain there to hear from these folks, more importantly for them to hear from you, Matt, I think will go a really long way, because sometimes they just need the details to go back and fight for it. And I think to your point, Mr. Chairman, we need to be organized in our ask, and we need to have the dollar amounts. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to provide them with specifics that they could go and lobby for that'll make a big impact on the day-to-day lives of a lot of our constituencies.
I couldn't agree more. I got to tell you, because Councilman Tinkler can chime in, I was really impressed with how informed they were on individual projects in and around. Of course, it was in their district, but the city council districts as well. So anyway, good. We're all in on.
You have to remember, Mr. Chairman, we've been doing those meetings
I see
about
Ms.
6 years now.
Ms.
So they've had a lot of time to get up to speed on drainage in the area.
Yeah, somebody's
Thank
been
you.
helping them out. Council Lady Parker.
Thank you for saying that, Mr. Fountain. They've had a lot of time. I mean, I apologize, but no, I don't apologize. I mean, they're not holding up their side. Also on the task force agenda, was there any discussion on maintenance? I know there wasn't.
Not on maintenance, but I would say there's projects, definitely. As a matter of fact, when we get to 9, I'll touch on one question they did ask that I said I would get the answer to, but don't want to leave 8 until we finish that topic.
No, I agree, but I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Fountain, because they're well aware.
Yeah. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I apologize. I'm not a member of the committee, but since I was at the task force meeting, I know one of the issues that the Department of Transportation raised is an issue you hear about from everybody, and that's they've got a 30% vacancy rate right now, and they're having a hard time with their maintenance side. So I'll leave you with that, but it's certainly a problem. I don't know if there's any way the city can help them address that. I know we've got our own problems.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Thanks for bringing that up, Councilman Tinkler, because, some time ago, probably a year and a half ago, Mr. Fountain recommended, I think there was one time we were down, Mr. Mayor, to 7 or 8 people on the ditch cleaning crew. And one of the things he suggested was, I'm gonna call it an upward mobile organization chart, where you may come in as a ditch digger, but you can, if you learn how to operate a bobcat or a backhoe, then you have a progression upward. And I know we're working on this consultant that's looking at our payroll and all this kind of stuff. But I got to tell you, that waiting on that plan versus instituting Councilman Gregor, help me out. You worked in government. I did not. I'm a private sector guy. What is that when you can get hired?
Career ladder.
Career ladder. That's the term I'm looking for. Thank you. That career ladder suggestion, I thought, and I'm not alone, was an excellent suggestion by Mr. Fountain. I thought we would have some implementation on it, but a year and a half has gone by, and we're still waiting on this consultant to tell us what to do. And as a result, we budgeted these items, these positions, and we can't fill them. In the meantime, the work doesn't get done. So I would hope that we could revisit that career ladder for those entry-level positions prior to the consultant, maybe even coming in here and telling us to do the same thing.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I thought that we voted, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that we had voted to support the career ladder approach that Matt had provided to us.
You mean sometime last year?
Yes, and
We can check with the clerk to see.
I totally agree with you. Not only on Matt's side of the house, but on other side of the house where we're waiting for this study to be completed, when to me, it's just a simple decision. And we need to talk a little more with the mayor about it, because I do agree with you. Some of the decisions that we're waiting a year and a half to do is not benefiting us in the interim at all. And I thought that we'd already agreed, because I think I was chairman of Human Resources at one point. I thought it came through us and it went to the body of a whole, and we voted to support Matt's recommendations for career ladders. Am I correct, Matt?
We did it through the budget ad hoc process for the departmental budget, Mr. Or Councilmember Gregory. So it was funded, but not yet progressed other than the funding.
Okay, and see, that's where my problem lies. I just think that again, we have the chairman of Human Resources on this committee, and maybe that's something that we need to just chat a little more with
let's circle outside the meeting on that, and let's close that. I agree with that. Let's close the meeting.
Okay.
All right,
Caroline, I'll give you a call.
Oh, I'm sorry. You finished? I didn't mean to cut across you, Councilman.
No, I'm just saying I'll give Caroline a call and give her a little more background on it.
Okay, good. I see
Chairman Parker, I'm sorry.
Okay. I see Ms. Parker's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, and I didn't want to cut y'all off, but yeah, we're definitely having those conversations. Talk to Matt, talk to some other folks in Stormwater. So yes, those are definitely, hopefully with the whole pay raise compensation study, that'll come this year. But I don't want to lose sight of how the conversation started. And Councilmember Tinkler, thank you for saying that, because I think that is what they'll say. Is obviously, we hear it all the time, vacancy rates, they don't have enough staff, but that's where we as a municipality, we can help. I mean, we have had those same exact struggles. I've been here for 2 years, and we've seen a huge improvement thanks to the members of council, this committee, everyone, Matt Fountain. So that excuse, I think it just can't hold a whole lot of water with me for much longer. I mean, we as a municipality, we need to take the lead. If they can't do it, then they need to come up with a dollar amount so that our crews can do it. Because we have, Mr. Fountain, I would love to know how many miles you've been able to clear with the crews and the temps that you have. You've been making it work. You've made miracles happen. So we know SCDOT can do it, but how do they need a dollar amount? Is that the next step? And that's what I really want. I really hope that this committee can focus on that. Thanks.
It'd be interesting. Last comment on this, and we'll move into item 9. Interesting that they may have the same problem we have with the career ladder piece. Maybe we will end up showing them maybe a pathway to achieving the same on the state side. Let's hope so. Let's move on to item G9, Central Park Road, Council Lady Parker.
Yes, sure. So a lot of, obviously, I'm sure this was a big discussion. It's a big discussion over here on James Island a lot. So I will let Matt sort of talk about the logistics, the engineering side of it. I know some, and Matt, you may touch on this. I know one of their issues is, there's a pipe that they want open, that it's not going to solve. It just might not solve the problem, but I just thought it would be a good thing for this committee to address, since we have a lot of city constituents over there. We have a lot of city issues on that side of town. And I think, I'll let you talk about a little more of the specifics, but that was really it. We're just getting a lot of, and then obviously with all the recent rain, as we know, everywhere on James Island has been underwater quite a few times the past couple months.
Well, Mr. Fountain, before you get started on that, that item about the 2 pipes and one having, I think, concrete in it. That was a big topic at Friday's meeting. And as a matter of fact, one of the requests was to ask the city to unplug one of the pipes. I wasn't that familiar with that, but I thought I would bring that to this issue. So, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this might be the most outreached project that the city has ever tried to accomplish. We have a whole series of video presentations on our website. We've gone to the James Island Town Council, James Island Intergovernmental Council, the legislative delegation meetings, we've had Zoom meetings, in-person meetings, neighborhood meetings, meetings at the city. This is a very active neighborhood, a lot of interaction between multiple neighborhoods and multiple jurisdictions. Central Park Wambah project, basically we worked with the county collaboratively with AECOM to come up with 4 major improvement projects through the area, looking at basically how could you improve the drainage arteries, for lack of a better word, the major systems, which are all very heavily constricted in this area. The county and the city split the areas, county taking basically the location that runs from near Woodland Shores through Stefan, down behind Howell Avenue, across Hollings Road, down across Central Park and into the river, into the marsh, James Island Creek, and the city taking the side of the neighborhood that is sort of splits between Laurel Park and Wimbledon, which is the Marlboro neighborhood. The canal that runs through there, across Central Park Road, under EME Apartments, and then out towards
Councilman Gregory, I'm asking you to mute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing that because we've been dealing with it for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm sorry.
It's a very long-running project. It's a
right.
very complex.
I'm sorry.
Hey Matt, can you
project.
hey Matt, can you share your move to the next slide? You're not showing Central Park on
Yeah,
the screen.
This is Central Park here. It's Central Park in the same project area.
Okay.
Okay.
Undo that. That did not work. So this is the Central Park map here. This flooding map. The red showing areas that are more than a foot deep of flooding during a 24-hour, 25-year storm event with some high tide interaction. So Central Park Road basically running right here, if you're not as familiar with the area, and Fleming coming this way, Folly Road being over here. So again, the city's working through this section here, out through Raleigh Road. The county has a rough design. They've gotten some ARPA funding for their work. They're looking at elevating Central Park Road to try to prevent that tidal overtopping of Central Park Road that we see, as well as improving the canal or the lake that sits behind that canal to hold more water, and then eventually trying to tie their northern area drainage through Hollings Road. And again, we can talk about this more deal. It's a multi-hour long discussion to get into all the individual project details. The city's been trying to work through that canal. We've got about 50% plans with AECOM. We're trying to get to the point where we can submit for Army Corps permits, which is what the county is trying to get to right now as well. We expect those Army Corps permits for each of us because we're doing tidal control of marsh vegetation systems to probably be a 2-year individual permit for each one of us, because it's a very difficult permitting process with the Corps with a lot of mitigation efforts. Then we will basically be able to do what's on the actual design plan, which is to go back and install very large box culverts under all of these road crossings. They're all dramatically undersized in their current condition. They really don't let the water come out, even at low tide, much less at high tide when we have real problems from it all and being impacted by the tide. So, for example, Central Park Road right here basically has a 36-inch and a 42-inch pipe. We're going to replace that with 2 4-foot by 9-foot box culverts to give you a sense of how undersized the pipes are in the area. So, again, we're working through our design. There's another set of pipes under the EME Apartment Road here. Just to highlight what you had talked about, Mr. Chairman, there were 2 pipes in this area when it looks like when the access road was widened from kind of a 1-lane or 2 lanes in one road to an island multi-lane road. One of the pipes was extended and one of the pipes basically was just abandoned at that point in time. So one of the pipes only goes about halfway through this road. Likely they looked at the upstream constrictions and said that's about all the capacity there is for stormwater to flow through this area. So there has been a request of the neighborhood to reopen this pipe. It's not that the pipe is blocked. It's just that there's only a pipe through about half of this road. We did take a quick look at doing that. I mean, it's a couple $100,000 to do that road removal and pipe installation in addition to the permitting effort. But then the challenge is you're going to come back and rip that pipe out in a couple of years to install the box culverts. So it would make more sense to go in and do box culverts. If we're going to do box culverts, it's a much more expensive project that would be much more efficient when you do your other box culverts. So we've always said we need to do it as a single project for efficiency purposes. Otherwise, you're basically making a very expensive improvement that really doesn't do much, except in very specific storm situations. There's a marginal improvement to drainage in the northern area. Basically, this constriction under Central Park Road still causes all of the flooding you see upstream, except everything at the very lowest tide. And at very lowest tide, there is maybe a 10% improvement in drainage flow. Roughly, we had an AECOM model all of this when the pipe was first discovered being blocked by one of the residents in the neighborhood, actually. Happy to cover it in more detail if there's questions.
Do we have a project cost for all of these if we did it as one project?
Very, very rough at this stage. We haven't gone back and done updated estimates, but in the ballpark of $5 million.
Hey, but question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Councilman. Go ahead.
Yeah, for Matt. Okay. Matt, I know we had the Wamba study, okay, and we have broken it down into phases. Am I correct? 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So it's 4 project areas that we're building as, yes, basically.
Right. Okay. Okay. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Okay.
It has. It's a very long run.
I think even when you worked for the county.
That's correct. We started when I was with the county. That's right.
Right. We were working on this project. But the question to me is, we knew about the need to replace and put a larger box culvert in since 1984.
That's right.
When Davis and Floyd did their
Floyd study. Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
So well, you can detect the frustration in my voice, but I'm just saying that to alert Council Member Parker that this has been a long-term project. It took us 4 or 5 years just to get the funding for the study. Okay. And that nothing to do with Matt, because Matt wasn't even there then. But again, I mean, this is going to be something, Council Member Parker, that if you need me to continue to sort of work and sort of debrief you on some of the stuff, just let me know, because this has been a long time trying to get this together.
But let me share, and I'll come to you in a second, Councilor Parker. Let me share that the frustration that you all just exemplified. I would double that for what was said on the task force. They said it went back at least 10 years. I mean, I'm talking Senator Sin, Representative Stavronakis, and obviously Ms. Honeycutt hadn't represented that long, but certainly she was all on the same page. And what's the representative starts with a W from Wetmore? Is it Whitmore?
Wetmore.
All of them in unison want to know what they could do. And I got to tell you, there's some rumor out there, because it was repeated twice, that somehow the city has put concrete in one of those pipes. So, Mr. Fountain, that communication that the mayor spoke to, we need to clarify that portion. But one thing they did ask was that the city have its funding. Now, I didn't speak up, but I sure thought we had our funding. Councilman Gregory, you may remember.
We put $5 million aside.
We refinanced a bond and we recaptured those dollars. I want to make sure those dollars are still there.
Right.
We need to get Ms. I don't know, Ms. Matt, if you know that answer, but certainly we can get Ms. Wharton.
I do, Mr. Chairman. We do have money still allocated from the drainage fund.
All right, good. I think our counterparts need to know that, so maybe we can speed this thing up to be a project.
And we did that, what, 2 years ago?
It was during COVID when we did it.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Set aside.
We had super low interest rates. I remember we did that. But anyway, Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm pretty up to speed on this project. I just kind of felt like, yeah, the city's sort of taking a lot of heat on that one initial pipe, and I think it's just really good to clarify what you just said, Mr. Fountain. But again, I mean, what can the state do? What can the state do? I mean, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Army Corps permits that both the county and the city need at this point, that's the next step. So
you're right.
what can we do as a city? What can we ask our legislators to do? Or better yet, what can and should the flood task force be doing to help us expedite those Army Corps permits? I mean, this is an extremely complex project. Look at all the work that has gone into this and that the city's done, securing the funding, all of this. But I mean, we need to get those permits or we can't move.
And they were willing to intercede on that part too. That was one of the things they volunteered at the end of the meeting. Again, Councilman Tinkler was there. And whatever they could do. I mean, like I gotta tell you, it wasn't a topic. They had a lot of good topics, but they had this one on the front burner, which was, very encouraging to see and hear. Ms. Parker, you still got your hand up. You want to be recognized, or I don't want to.
Sure. I'll just end on this, just a quick follow-up. So I guess what I'd like, I mean, maybe we could, I think like you were talking about the outfall permits, Councilman Gregory, and you've obviously been, way deeper into this project than I have. For clarification, this isn't even in my district. It's just on James Island. And obviously being the one that lives on James Island, I hear a lot about it, but maybe we need a little more advocacy or, PR just, and I'm not saying from your end, Mr. Fountain, sounds like you've done, obviously the neighborhood is well aware, they're very involved, but relaying that.
What if we,
let me recognize
what
the
if we
mayor,
cancel?
Councilman Parker, if you want, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think if we're asking what we can do, I think it sounds like there's a lot of information there. Sounds like we have the match. Sounds like we need to just make a very detailed and very specific ask of our state delegation. And I'd say the sooner we can do that, the better.
I agree. As a matter of fact, when Logan let them know that he stood up and let them know we're going to be coming up to Columbia because he can see it better than I. Almost to a person on the state representative say we're going to do a meet and greet and all of that, and he said, well, don't come up there if you don't ask for anything. Because he made it clear the ask will be coming later, but they were insistent.
No, I think at this, and perhaps Matt, I'm not trying to put busy work here, but just a summary of what specifically we are looking for from the state. And look, I'll drive up to Columbia, make the ask. We just need to have all the intel, and clearly there's a lot of it, and you're well versed in it. So if you or your department could just provide something that gives a specific ask, I'm all in.
Yeah, nobody knows, Rich.
I think we've done some of that already. And I think that's why I think it's important for Matt to be at those meetings. Because the intergovernmental portion of this, Matt's been working on for years, the county, Army Corps of Engineers, the state. So again, I think you're right, Mr. Mayor, that we're going to need Matt at those meetings because I think he can answer some of those questions.
Yeah, I agree. Let me recognize Councilman McBride.
Yeah, sorry, just really quick. Again, I'm new at this, so I don't know what's been done as far as seeking funding. I happened to have run into Nancy Mace's field representative, Noah Longest. He happens to live on Johns Island. I'm working with him to put together some information for him to go through Congresswoman Mace to seek federal funding grants for Johns Island issues and James Island issues. I'm hoping that's already been done or attempted at, amongst the city staff seeking similar kind of funding. But if not, I just didn't want to not mention it, that according to him, there's federal funding for all kinds of things out there. You just have to ask through a field representative like him, and then he'll put it out there, and there's a federal agency that figures out what kind of federal grant money could apply to it, and then you go from that point forward. So I just wanted to bring that up.
All right, thank you. Any final input on Central Park Road? Let me tell you, that was a hot button issue again on Friday, so I suspect it would have been today as well, and it has been.
Well, just to wrap it up, I mean, Matt, can you provide something, even if it's a one-page summary that we can, and it sounds like you've done this multiple times over, so I hate the duplication of efforts, but it can be provided and we can make the hard pitch for it.
Yep, absolutely, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, down to number 10, update on Medical District Tunnel Extension, the Earhart Project, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's just updating the committee that the project is substantially complete, which means it is functioning from a drainage perspective. There certainly is some cleanup work and some utility work that they're finishing on the project, but the drainage component of the project is now operational. It's the first successfully completed HUD CDBG MIT project in South Carolina for this round of funding from that HUD program. They have a ribbon cutting scheduled for June 2024. They're expecting the governor to come down, Dr. Cole, and some of the other hospital heads to come out for it. The mayor obviously is a prime attendee. And then we're working with MUSC right now to tie in some additional surface drainage to try to improve how well Jonathan Lucas and some of the other streets tie through Dowdy into Earhart as MUSC goes through some improvement work they have in this area on some of their buildings. Just for a quick perspective of kind of difference in performance for the area, I've got a couple of graphics. So the left, which is shocking when I say this, but this is actually a very small amount of flooding for Earhart Street on the left. Typically floods like 3 feet deep here. But this was at the absolute peak of the storm event during the April event when we had all that rain all at once at high tide. Remember, this is tied in the Spring Fishburne system. The pumps aren't operational yet, so at high tides, we'll still see initial flooding. Earhart is the lowest thing in the entire Spring Fishburne Basin, so it is the last thing to drain. But you can see on the right, this is a couple hours later, the street had completely drained out and was clean, where before you would have seen that flooding for at least a couple of days after the event. So as we get the pumps online with Spring Fishburne, should see it behaving more like this bottom right image, making a huge improvement for the medical district for their access to the psychiatric hospital and kind of the back roads into the medical district. So very successful project, very well received.
And that's just with gravity, right?
That is just with gravity, no pumps yet. During
right.
a relatively high tide, very intense.
Right.
Yep. So big improvement. Still not a passable street. That's why we're building the pumps on the Spring Fishburne project. We wouldn't build the pumps if we didn't need the pumps. But not to the level where it was damaging anything or coming into any of the buildings and draining out within a couple of hours, which is a big difference for that district.
All right. Sounds like a little bit more progress. That's always good.
Big
Any
step forward.
questions on Earhart project? I didn't see Mr. Seeking's on here, but I know he was, but anyways.
Mr. Chairman,
thanks, Matt.
Very briefly that
Sure.
We do have that negotiated change order that we finalized. That's going to come through Ways and Means probably before we have another Public Works Utilities Committee in May. So just want to make sure everyone we've talked about that a number of times.
I know we have. Can you remind us of the amount?
I have to look at the exact final contractual amount. We're on the scale of $1 million. It's there's some unallocated line items and then some additional costs for some additional pipe bedding and things that are outside of the contractual change order, but roughly on the scale of $1 million. That was for some unanticipated conditions from the contractor and the tunneling work where the Cooper Marl behaved differently than expected. And then a duct bank that was on this Earhart corridor. We had to delay the project while we redesigned basically the cross pipe culvert to avoid conflicting with that duct bank.
All right, great. All right. Last item is an executive session. Can we entertain a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor of going into executive session to receive legal advice? Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right.
All right,
Who
let me
can
put
put
you
us in
guys
there?
breakout
will-
rooms.
I will bow out since I'm not in this committee.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, do you know who all needs to be in the room? Or Julia, if you have an answer for that.
Councilman Tankler, obviously committee members, obviously you.
All right.
Yeah, and
I think they've got him.
1, 2. Do we have a quorum now? Is the mayor off and
yeah, he's
Seekings is
off.
off?
He's off, yeah.
2, 3.
That's okay. We're gonna have a
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, okay.
We
Okay, if
got-
there's no quorum, I'll just go ahead and turn off the
Well, who's guest one? Who's guest one?
recording.
I see guest one. Do we know who that is?
Oh, that's a good point. Okay.
Julie, is a quorum for this one 3 or 4? Do we have Councilmember Parker, Councilmember Chairman, and Councilmember Gregory?
I think we have 5, so I think we're okay. Wait, let me just look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 members. As long as we have 3, good.
And Matt, do you need to be in the
members.
room?
Yeah, I'd like to have Matt in there.
All right. Then I am gonna try and do that.
Okay.
Okay.
still right here. They're in executive session. Yeah. I have no idea how to do any of the, okay, thank you. Matt, can I close the room or are they still talking? All right.
You can close the room. They're ready to come out.
Sorry about that interruption in the middle there.
No, you're okay. It just started recording when you popped in, which I think threw everyone off for a second.
No, it didn't go live or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it didn't say it was streaming. It just said recording.
Okay.
Yep. But yeah, they're ready to come out and wrap, I think.
Yeah, I pressed the button. They should be coming in soon. Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you. Let's entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
I'll be moved in second. All in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Yeah, the ayes have it. Just let the record show that we had an executive session to get some legal advice. And I don't have the address, but please put the address in there. And on Donahue Drive, I just don't have the address.
It's 1584 Holton
I'm sorry, 1584 Holton.
Place, yes.
No action was taken. By acclamation, we stand adjourned. I really appreciate everybody's for their patience and salutations on this meeting. But I think we got something accomplished. Thanks a lot. And I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow.
Thank you.